Omniverse. Hey, this is Cat.
And Jess.
You know, Mother She Wrote is free to listen to, but it's not free to make.
So please, consider supporting our work on Patreon or supporting Cast.
You'll get early, ad-free episodes of this show, and a whole lot more.
Head to mothershewrote.earth/support to chip in and join our community of world-saving wonderkind.
Love you! Welcome to Mother She Wrote, a travelogue diary through the strangest, most thought-provoking, most heart-rending video games ever made. Mother, as it's called in Japan, and EarthBound, as it's called everywhere else, except that in this episode, which is not the regular episode, we're not talking about EarthBound at all, though we are talking about this program, Mother She Wrote. Anyway, I guess this is the intro, and hi, I'm Kat.
Hey, I'm Jess.
And it's been a while since you've heard from us. We're sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Despite the fact that you haven't heard from us, we've been very, very busy.
And in this episode, we're going to tell you what we have been doing, what is to come, and then circle back around to a little note that you might remember from like episode 0 of our first season.
This is not, as you may have noticed, a regular episode or a dimensional slip. This is actually something different.
Yeah, not something we'll be doing particularly often, I imagine, but a way for us to share with you, beloved listeners out there, sweet little noodle noggins, that we are not dead. And there are new episodes coming, but then also, as a bonus, so it's not just like housekeeping, well, we're going to talk about another video game.
You may remember way back in episode 0 where we mentioned that our all-time favorite video games were different. Cat's, of course, was EarthBound.
And I asked Jess to, I said, hey, you should play EarthBound. And I loaned her my SNES Mini, and she played it, because she's great.
Yeah. And I mentioned that my favorite game of all time was a little Japanese role-playing game called Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's pretty obscure.
Marketed as Final Fantasy III in the United States, it is a game that I hold very near and dear to my heart. I played it a lot growing up. My friend group all played it together. It was a big part of sort of forming the overall psychic landscape, if you will, of my thinking and growing up and kind of like going forward into adulthood.
Yeah, and that was true for a lot of my friends as well. But in spite of all of them saying like, ooh, this is a good game and you should play it, I was like, I don't play turn-based RPGs. That's boring nerd stuff. I play The Legend of Zelda, an action RPG, because I value action. Why, if I'm going to play a Squaresoft game, I'll be playing Secret of Mana, thank you.
But despite that, many years later, after we met and we were talking about our favorite games, we made a little deal together. I said I would play EarthBound, and Kat said that she would play Final Fantasy VI. As Kat mentioned, I borrowed her SNES Mini and promptly completed that game, and it was delightful. But then time passed, and a little bit more time passed, and Kat played a little bit of Final Fantasy VI.
And then I had to restart and play it again.
And then you moved.
And I played it again, and then we moved. And, I didn't hit it as hard as I should, but I was playing, via completely legitimate means, of course, but via those completely legitimate means, something went funny, and the save didn't actually hold between sessions, so I played many hours only for it to go away. And that kind of took the wind out of my sails, not once, but twice. But I played it now.
Yay!
I did the thing. I'm a good partner, everybody. I did it. I did it for real. It only took several years.
But we sat down together and we played through basically the back half of the game together. This episode is going to contain all the spoilers for Final Fantasy VI. So
yeah. That's true.
If you're like Kat and you have a partner who is their favorite game of all time and you promised to play it and you haven't yet, you may want to skip out on this.
Yeah, now's the time to just sit down and do it. It's a good game. So no surprise there. So yeah, we are going to talk about Final Fantasy VI and my feelings on it. Just a kind of like a weird annotation to the timeline.
The overall lore of Mother She Wrote,
yeah.
more so than EarthBound itself.
Yeah. This is just like sort of following up on that loose thread. Because people do ask me every now and then. They come into the Omniverse Discord and they're like, hey, have you finished that yet? And I'll be like, no. I haven't. It's not because I don't like it. It's because, well, I mean, there were other stuff like I was like, Jess, I can't play Tears of the Kingdom. I have to finish this game. It's important to me. It's important to you. And she's like, but I really need to talk to you about Tears of the Kingdom, so I need you to play it. And I was like, you don't understand. I can't do Zelda lightly. And I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I still haven't beaten it because I am probably 100%ing that sucker. Who knows? We'll find out.
That'll come next.
Also, I mean, quite frankly, I don't play video games that often. Like, I'm too busy doing other things, as we will soon discuss. But I suppose backtracking a smidge, you may have ascertained from prior discussions, I started playing turn-based RPGs because of EarthBound. EarthBound was my gateway drug to turn-based RPGs, which I was pretty sure I did not like and were boring. It might have been that my mathematics and reading comprehension just wasn't good enough that I felt confident as a young person at that particular point in time. I'm not really sure. I can't go back and ask me.
So before we jump into talking more about Final Fantasy VI, Kat, go ahead and let's fill everybody in on what's going on with Mother She Wrote.
All right. What's going on with Mother She Wrote is after episode 10, we have episode 11, 12, 13, and 14. 4 more episodes for the season 1 travelogue through EarthBound Beginnings. And they ended up being way bigger than we thought they were going to. Like, way bigger. We have relatively final page counts for episodes 11 and 12, for example. And in script writing, you can kind of assume that 1 page equals 1 minute of audio. Episode 11 is 62 pages, and episode 12 is 60 pages. So that is episode 11 and 12, at least those two, are full hour-long episodes of just the audio drama.
Yeah.
That's not even the discussion parts. Could we split it up? Yeah, we could split it up, but then that would kind of throw off the mojo. They're like hour-long television episodes. And why are they so long? Well, they're so long actually because in this third act, I discovered that in order to get all the kind of pieces together and to carry over all of that, like, narrative energy that we've been building, it's going to take a little bit more time than I expected. Could I write them simply like we did the first several episodes of the season? Yeah, we could. But
it's great. So, we're going with it.
Jess likes it. So Jess likes it, and that means we're going to do it. So yeah, and we are then going to record all of it at once. Now, we are currently sound designing. As I finish up scenes, Jess is sound designing them. So we have like sketches so we can keep moving forward. And then we are going to record all of the main cast, myself, Jess, Sarah who plays Anna, Christian who plays Teddy. We're going to get together and we're going to do the final episodes together. And it's going to be great. But it's just taken a little bit of time, and we're getting that done. And then, of course, we've got the Shigesato Itoi and Keiichi Suzuki interviews, but those need to come out after
the story is finished.
Yeah, after the story is finished, because, I mean, maybe you out there are an EarthBound expert and you're ready for it, but we want to make sure that everything flows together, that, like...
You need the context of the story so that you can understand everything that those two are saying.
Yeah. Also, production of, taking a Japanese language speaker and then making that into a podcast for English language, we didn't undertake that lightly, and so it requires a lot of...
It's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts to make that happen.
That's all to say that when we do start releasing episodes again, they're going to be very regular. So no more of this, like episode 11 comes out and then an indeterminate amount of time before 12 comes out. When episode 11 comes out, it's going to be like a couple of weeks, and then episode 12, a couple of weeks, episode 13, a couple of weeks, episode 14, like that.
Yeah. That's the plan with those. Do we have a date yet? No, we don't, because honestly, folks, life keeps throwing us curveballs. I was in a car accident early this month, and I'm lucky that I am, like, functional and have minimal battle damage. Like, it's been a steady flow of, wait, what's happening to life now? Oh, we have to worry about this? Oh, okay. And we're indie artists and, and also moms of 2 kids. So we're doing what we can.
It's coming, though.
It's coming.
And it's going to be great.
And so, and I hope that with the knowledge that, Jess and Cat are basically making, like, a movie for the third act, and it's actively in production, you'll be like, it's cool because it's going to be great, and it'll be worth the wait, and that'll be fine. And yes, suffice it to say, we are not going to be recording any future seasons in this haphazard way. We have learned from this production, and we shall move forward in a different style, which we will address later.
Yeah. But let's get back to Final Fantasy VI because, yeah, it's my favorite game of all time, and I was so excited to share this with you.
Yes, then thank you for insisting, because honestly, at this point in my life, I probably would have just been like, I missed it when it happened, and I'm not going back to it.
So I'm going to start with the same question that you asked me when we had our first discussion about EarthBound.
Okay.
So, what do you think?
I think it's really good. I think it is... I can see entirely how unique and groundbreaking it was at the time. And there's so much about it that is super endearing and super fun. But it also, at this point, it does kind of suffer from the, like, when it came out. Because as we started to finish it up, I was thinking about, okay, when did this come out in the chronology of Squaresoft released video games on the Super Nintendo?
And that was 1994, by the way.
Yeah, it's responsible for basically most of the major developments in that style or that company's style of role-playing games. It all begins here, and it all is kind of connected to each other, and it all is important.
Yeah. Now, neither of us has played very much of Final Fantasy V, so I don't think we can really speak to how much there was that was sort of developed, between 4 and 6. Like, I played 4 a whole bunch, and I played 6 a whole bunch, but never really played 5.
I've played 5 a little bit, but it was so long ago I barely remember it. Right away, one of the most unique things about Final Fantasy VI is its steampunk aesthetic and like that kind of more like the thing that would become a sort of hallmark of most Final Fantasy games about this hybrid of like medieval fantasy and high technology, and that what I have read is that it's kind of like a hybridization of the character interplay of 4 with the like battle mechanic interplay of 5, but I don't know if how accurate that is because I can't speak from experience.
Yeah, because they did there were several of the early Final Fantasy games that used the job system. I think it played pretty heavily in 5, if I remember correctly.
Maybe. I really wish I could remember.
But you're right. Like, it's so interesting because you can really see how so many ideas that are present in Final Fantasy VII going forward were first introduced in 6.
Yes, entirely. Which immediately my question is, why haven't they remade this one? This is the one that people love this game. This game is so revered. But Final Fantasy VII, which I also love, it gets all the attention. But it didn't really need to be remade.
Well, they did remake 6, and I would argue with you that they did need to remake 7. But
I mean, yeah, Cloud's wonky hourglass polygon arms, they don't look good. But like, I mean, they have remade this, but they haven't have they really?
They remastered it, I guess.
Right. Okay, but all these characters, they deserve. You can see what someone wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Like it. In some ways, it also has an impressionistic quality to it in terms of like this game is clearly pushing against the limitations of the system hardware. It makes complete sense that their next game was Final Fantasy VII, which feels like everything they did in Final Fantasy VI, but with almost like a decade's worth of technology just crammed into it.
Yeah,
in a very brief period of time.
You can really tell, so Final Fantasy VI has a playable roster of like, what is it, like 14 characters or something like that?
Something like that. It's a lot.
It's got a pretty big roster. They're all unique characters that have unique mechanics to them, different ways that they do battle. They all have their own backstory and sort of their own things that they're working through, and they really do a great job of interplaying all those dynamics together.
Yeah, this is a character-forward game, and I love that.
And also, the developers were very explicit in saying that they didn't want there to be a main character of this story. I think you could arguably look at it and say that Terra is probably like the main character, but...
Or that there are some characters that are basically the main characters and the other characters are very much supporting characters.
But they really wanted it to be an ensemble cast, and they even allow you to choose what your party composition is going to be. Pretty much throughout the entire game. There's like certain story bits that require
early
a certain
on,
character
people come
be in
and
your
go,
party.
yeah.
But by and large, up until like the very end, you're allowed to like form your party from that roster of characters and choose who you're going to carry into battle.
Yeah, and importantly, like there's a sort of a tactics-based component of switching between parties that you've crafted, and so you do have to have. I mean, mechanically, you have to have an upkeep for your characters so that you've got like decent equipment. You can afford decent equipment for all the characters that you may be needing to use. Like you can't be stingy about that. You can't put characters in a closet and say, I'm never going to use you. I mean, you can a little bit after a certain point in time, but you have to keep them in play, and to understand, to enjoy most of the game, you kind of need to explore that, like at least using some of the characters some of the time.
Yeah. And kind of going back to what you were saying about the impressionistic qualities of it, they really have to do a whole lot with the sprite art to convey different actions that are happening. When someone is being knocked to the ground, or there's like an earthquake that's happening and everybody kind of, gets knocked to the ground, or they're getting thrown around the room, or they're flying, or, something like that. They don't have individual sprite art for most of that, and they're just kind of making do with what they do have. And they really accomplish some incredible storytelling even with that limitation.
Yeah, I was really impressed with how much they did. Now, I think it comes out at a very important time. This game actually came out after Secret of Mana, which I was shocked by, because Secret of Mana, graphically, there's a lot of, it's very cartoony. There's a lot of different sorts of animation that are happening. It feels like Secret of Mana would have been, it has such a sort of aesthetic polish to it that it would have come afterwards. But it didn't. And what's happening in Final Fantasy VI is far more, I think it's more technically complicated, but they're both on kind of similar playing fields. I'd be really curious how far they pushed what could be done on the hardware. But after this point, what immediately follows, like in terms of like big Square releases, the year after Final Fantasy VI, basically the same team makes Chrono Trigger, where they take all of the ideas that they started working on in Final Fantasy VI and pare stuff down and focus it so that you have fewer characters, but you do almost certainly spend a lot of time with all of them so that you have deep affection for all of them no matter what, and a really focused story that doesn't really let you get lost as much as Final Fantasy VI does. But it's doing its own thing. It is surprising how much they were able to learn from the experience of Final Fantasy VI and then transport it in that other game, and then kind of like keep building off of it in different ways, like all the way to Final Fantasy VII. And it all comes from this source. And all these games are legendary. It's crazy that they were made by a lot of the same people in an extremely short window of time. I can't imagine what their personal lives were like.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing that I really love about this area of RPGs. I love that because they were so limited by the sprite art and what they could do sort of narratively with it, I think they really had to focus a lot more on the writing and the character development with sort of the impressionistic qualities of it.
Yeah, so this is the first game made by someone other than series creator Hironobu Sagauchi. It's directed by Yoshinori Kitase and Hiroyuki Ito. I would love to learn more about exactly how the game was made, but you shared a lot of lore with me while we were playing together, like about how all of this crazy roster of characters were all designed by different people, and that like their plot lines, I guess maybe also their like mechanics. Ito was the battle designer. He's the guy who created the active time battle, which was a huge thing for Final Fantasy. Like he worked on the battle stuff for Final Fantasy 4 and 5. And then went on to do Chrono Trigger, battle design for Final Fantasy VIII, and he was the director of Final Fantasy 9 and 12, which makes a lot of sense. And then Kitase, she was the Final Fantasy Adventure game designer and scenario writer, and then was the field planner for Final Fantasy V, as well as the event planner and the scenario writer, so it makes sense that he kind of graduated into working on Final Fantasy VI, and he went on to do, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy X. So it all kind of starts here because old Final Fantasy dies here.
Yeah. Their big ideas really graduated with the technology. And like we said earlier, You can really see how a lot of the ideas that they were beginning to introduce and really kind of perfected in the 16-bit version for Final Fantasy VI got carried over into 3D. And honestly, Final Fantasy has not been the same ever since.
No, but there's a very important thing about this game, which a friend pointed out to me when he found out I was playing it. And that is that this is the last Final Fantasy game where the characters were, generally speaking, allowed to not all be like J-pop idols. As terms of like their characters, their aesthetics. There are exceptions to that, of course. We all know there are exceptions to that. But these are most of these characters are not like pretty. I mean, they got Strago, he's an old man. You got Cyan, I think he's an old man too, maybe.
I mean, Final Fantasy IX, they weren't like J-pop idols like Steiner and
Final Fantasy IX is a treasure and kind of exists in its own bubble. Final Fantasy IX is one of the guys from Final Fantasy VI being like, but what if we did the old stuff?
Right, yeah.
And then doing it better than the old stuff, in my humble opinion, from what little I've played of the older stuff.
Fair enough.
But it is a really cool pile of ideas in a world where games with stories were still really precious and really unique. You got a lot of story in this game. Dealing with some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Because, and here's where we're going to get into like hardcore spoiler territory, you live through the apocalypse in this game. There's a big turning point and the world ends. And you know what? Somehow, after all this time, that didn't get spoiled for me.
Yeah, I was shocked by that.
I had no idea that like the entire, like a global event that screws up the entire world map turns it into like this unrecognizable chaos of continents. I didn't know that happened. And that was really cool to sort of exploring that kind of disruption in a game is still extraordinarily unique to this game.
Yeah. And I love that too, because in so many games you have the freedom to eventually kind of go anywhere and do anything and revisit any area that you had been to before. That's not the case with this game. It very suddenly just removes you completely from everything that you've known.
I never knew what act of the game I was in. I knew how many hours I'd been playing, but it got real interesting in how like the event pacing was going down.
Right. Well, in the second half of the game, in the World of Ruin, once you have your airship back, which happens pretty early on, you can go to the end of the game. You can go to the final boss and finish it if you're powerful enough to. But it really, in the second half, kind of becomes an open world game in a lot of ways.
It totally does, yeah.
And there's all kinds of stuff to do in this new world, and you can really just kind of do it at your own pace.
On some levels, it gets the limitations of the game graphically, and that like it has been so disrupted. I found it to be like pretty confusing at that point. I mean, it should be. That's kind of experiential with that kind of disruption, but I never felt like I understood where things were particularly well, because just as I was beginning to kind of get a feel for the other world map, I had to like do it all over again, and it just wasn't like, I feel like I knew the layout of the world better in Secret of Mana, which also has a Mode 7 flying thing, than in this game, which I think is probably because the map changed, and it made it so I felt a bit disconnected from the world in a way that I'm not used to. I think like I felt more cohesion in Final Fantasy VII with the world map and the way that that's kind of revealed and my exploration through it.
Don't you think it's kind of fun though, because you're in this apocalyptic world and you're going around and you never know who you're going to run into or what situation they're going to be in.
I think that's awesome. I think that it's my exploration was a bit weird and tedious.
Yeah.
At that stage. I liked it, but I feel like it could be, I can't really put my finger on what it was, but that the limitations of some aspect of the graphics and stuff made me feel a little unmoored from the game, and that discovery was a little difficult because I couldn't tell like, oh shoot, have I been here before? And then I have to like land to a town and be like, go in the town and be like, okay, this is this town. No. All right. So I got to keep looking. And then like, I'll end up going to the same town a couple times by accident, because I'm like, wait, have I been here before? So,
yeah.
Little things like that. But that's, in terms of storytelling, it's really cool. Because not only in the third act do you rebuild your party, but then you also get a bunch of new people through really bizarre means. Like truly, like getting eaten by a worm to go to a secret dungeon. Like
a dungeon inside a worm.
Yeah. like an enemy that you think, oh, I should kill that, but you need to not do that, and then you need to get eaten by it instead, and then you're like, okay, you don't even know why you're there. If there was anything that was telling you that you could do that in the game, I did not experience it. I don't know, is there a hint that I missed that would have told me to do that?
I don't remember, but I don't think there is. I think it's literally just one of those things because Go-Go is an optional character, right? You don't have to recruit them.
Yeah. I think that the character interplay in this game is really strong. It's super fun. Everybody's like got their own thing going on. Like the fact that Sabin requires fighting game style button inputs to do his martial arts. That's really cool. That Setzer has that like roulette mechanic. And admittedly, even though I was pretty okay at using it, I did not like it enough to keep doing it.
Mog has dances.
Yeah, which I like, and I love Mog, but I never understood particularly how the dances worked or where I got. I knew it was all environmental. There's a lot of stuff they don't tell you, and figuring out's kind of part of it. So there's a bunch of things I'm still in the dark about. I didn't find all the magicite. I didn't beat all the dragons. But I did beat the game.
Yeah. And I had to say too that when I played this game back in the 90s, there was no internet, or at least it was, very early. There was no not a lot of resources out there to help tell you where to go or what to do or where to find this or that or what items to bet in the arena to get better items. You had to figure a lot of that yourself. So as we were playing through it this time, and I'm sort of like looking up things as on the internet as you're playing along, I was discovering all kinds of stuff that even I didn't know was in the game.
Yeah. I mean, this would have been a game that if I got into it at the time, I would have totally bought a strategy guide for it. Mostly because I kind of enjoy the strategy guide experience. Not because I use the strategy guide as like a recipe for getting through the game, but I really love like the artwork and stuff, and I had the Secret of Mana strategy guide. I didn't need it to beat the game, but I loved experiencing the game with this kind of greater depth.
Yeah, that's all to say that this game really rewards you for exploring and experimenting.
Yes, it definitely does.
And there are some seriously game-breaking things that you can find and combos that you can find in the game if you know where to look.
Yeah, there are just so many interesting. I could see these really cool techniques. Some of them are more straightforward than others, and I really love the weird mechanics. But I never felt like I had the right environment to do that in, or characters like Realm. The little kid who paints
portraits of creatures,
monsters, and steals their moves and stuff. Or later on there's another function that lets you just kind of manipulate them, their bodies,
take
and
control of them,
use their moves. Yeah, that's all super cool. But they're the last character you get, in terms of the mains before.
Well, they're the last character you got.
I could have done that sooner.
Yeah,
I could have gone to the magical.
The place where Realm was?
Yeah.
Yeah. You could have gone there right away if you wanted to.
Huh. Cool. That's cool. Would have loved to. Didn't. I mean, it reminded me a lot also of the game in general and the character interplay. In Chrono Cross, later on, they introduced way too many characters, quite frankly. With all had their own things going on, and which ones you used really affected what was happening in that story in cool ways, but an absurd amount of detail, and you never got to enjoy them enough. They were all a bit more surface level because there were so many of them. Or Saga Frontier, which has a bunch of characters who all have their own kind of energy to them in the same way these characters have their own energy, but perhaps a little bit less cohesive in terms of their interplay in the story.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to for a
Yes.
second to, you mentioned the art earlier.
Yeah, Mono.
I just want to call out the sprite art in this game is incredible.
It is really good.
I don't
Yeah.
know if there's any other game that has as much high quality sprite art as this one does.
I did not write out the name of the guy who did the sprite out, but shout out to that guy. This is some really Baroque sprite art. It is good. It is very good.
There are so many interesting enemies. When a lot of earlier JRPGs would just do a palette swap version of an enemy, this game goes hard on a lot of unique designs. And, they do palette swaps.
Sure, of course they do.
As well. But
How are you going to save that memory space,
Yeah, there are enemies that you will fight once. And it's only barely a boss. And they have big, elaborate sprite art for it that is really inspired. And yeah, like you said, it looks like a Baroque painting.
Yeah, things this is definitely fresh in my mind because it's the end of the game, but you have to fight these 3 statues which have these kind of different like beings embodied within them. And one of them is, I mean, they're all really elaborate sprites, but one of them is a goddess. And the way that the battle is done, like there's a lot of cool variety in this Final Fantasy game in terms of like there's the battle where there's the enemy on the left side and you're on the right side, or if the enemy's on the right side and you're on the left side, well, that's an enemy that snuck up on you. But then also you can do a pincer attack where you've surrounded the enemy, or vice versa. And so in this goddess battle, your characters are like 2 on either side of this gorgeous, beautiful sprite that's taking up the middle center of the screen, which is just, that's a wild idea.
Yeah.
I love that.
I feel like they must have gotten some better tools for doing the sprite art in this game.
Right.
As far as like sketching it out on paper and then scanning it in or something. I don't know, but like it seems like there was a huge jump up, at least between Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI.
Final Fantasy IV, it's been a while since I looked at that, but graphically the jump between this game and Chrono Trigger makes more sense than the jump between Final Fantasy IV and V in this game. Like there's just, it feels like this one has more of something to say, and its art is detailed and stylized in a very particular way. The scenarios are unhinged. It's like the Key and Peele sketch about Gremlins 2. It's not just in the game, it is in the game. Like, oh, what if a guy suplexes a train, a ghost train? And they're like, okay, we'll make that work. Sure, whatever. What if there's a scene where you need to remember the parts of an opera, and while you're doing that, and you need to like do this kind of weird mini game that you're never going to see again, you're also fighting a sarcastic octopus who's like your reoccurring joke nemesis throughout the entire game. Okay. I knew 2 things about Final Fantasy VI going into, well, 3 things. I knew 3 things about Final Fantasy VI going into it. I knew that you suplex a train. I knew there was an opera scene that was a big deal for some reason. And that Kefka is like the Joker, I guess. Like, and Kefka's a neat villain. I never understood his motives ever. And that's one of those things where like, I like how much tragedy they explored, but if they had a chance to do it again, they would probably give more motive, which I would like at this point.
You're right. They don't explain his character a lot. But honestly, I think that's kind of the point. I think that Kefka is supposed to represent this inexplicable evil that can't be reasoned with, that cannot have their motivations changed. It is sort of the larger struggle that humanity has against itself. I mean, I think that in some ways, maybe Kefka represents like the atomic bomb. And when Kefka's rays are sort of like, you know, destroying the world or like splitting it in half or whatever, or rearranging the continents, I think that is maybe like a statement of the path that humanity was on as far as developing technology to destroy the world. In fact, I think I've heard that comparison
well,
made
I mean,
before.
That's a reoccurring theme in so much Japanese media, but especially role-playing video games from the 90s. They're all like we have. If you've been on the Omniverse server at all, you've seen ourselves and Biozilla talking extensively about the stuff we talked about in the last episode we put out in this feed. Really, we were talking with ostensibly about the Secrets of Mother 2 exhibit. However, we learned in the process so much about the kind of like pre-millennium apocalypse prophecy mania going on in Japan at the time that, like, you know, was definitely provoked by the bombing of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but then like went on to like absorb the Nostradamus prophecies reinterpreted by this Japanese dude who had some very bad intentions and a whole whirlwind of topics. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Omniverse server if you're curious to dig into that. But, you know, there's so many games that deal with this kind of like world-breaking, world-ending prophecy rooted in all of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Lavos and Chrono Trigger, because
the Comet and Illusion of Gaia.
Right.
And yeah,
I think that Kefka is just another form of that. And I don't think they really wanted to do a whole lot of backstory and explanation of his motives and everything, because they just wanted him to be like a force rather than a person.
Which, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. That's a, you know, emotionally, that's a very real and realized thing. It doesn't take too long before you're like, this guy's like a petulant, power-hungry child. That I mean, like, I'm not saying that this isn't a real facet of the human condition, because clearly it is. But I'm of the Guillermo del Toro camp of like, in order to really fully realize a monster, you have to understand what that monster does when it's alone, or what it looks like when it sleeps. And I think Kefka's a really interesting idea. And I don't need to know much. I just kind of wanted a little bit more. And maybe it's out there. Maybe it's like a known thing, but I'm not sure.
I haven't looked into this, but I mean, at least like the final boss of Final Fantasy IV is some sleeping monster on the moon. And the final boss of Final Fantasy I is, chaos. It's these things that you never interface with until the very end of the game. I think that Final Fantasy VI might have been the first time where you have a lot of interaction with that entity leading before you get to the final conflict.
It becomes a lot more than the JRPG trope of kill and dethrone God. In this case, this is just this literal Joker of a character who you have watched get more and more power until he becomes as powerful as a god in theory. And you have to knock him down a size.
Right.
Which I think is great. I mean, it is great.
But again, they took a lot of those ideas and sort of refined them for Final Fantasy VII, I think. I mean, Sephiroth is obviously very different from Kefka, but I feel like there's some similarities there.
Well, they both end up with angel wings.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's kind of like another concept that was introduced in Final Fantasy VI that was then fully realized in 7. It's almost like they gave Sephiroth a bit more story, a bit more motivation. You kind of understand that character archetype a little bit better.
Yeah. I love these characters. I love their mechanics. I love different aspects of the ways that the world works together. I love crazy stuff like, we got a castle and it burrows underground, I guess, and like can travel from desert to desert, but like we'll bump into a mysterious place in the ocean. Okay.
Go explore that for a little bit.
That's super neat. I mean, this game is like a weird dream, and I love it.
Yeah.
All I'm ultimately saying is, I love it. I want more. I wish there was more.
Well, there is. There's like, 17 Final Fantasy games now or something like that?
No, but those ones they're different. I want more of this one. Mm-hmm. Just like people say they want more of 7. And, like, I too was like, yeah, they should remake Final Fantasy 7. I said that in the past. And I'm sure the remake is good and cool. I love to see all the random stuff about it that I see. I haven't played it yet. I don't know when I will. But with this one, I'm like, man, you could do so much. I would love to spend more time with Setzer and really like get a sense for his deal a lot more. I would love to play with Mog more than I got the opportunity to play with Mog. I would love to really get into playing Strago, but I just didn't have the time to do that. And I'm still kind of waiting on his character to reveal itself to me. Maybe I missed something.
Yeah, if they were to have made this game today, there would be a ton more scenarios where you would be forced to use a subset of characters and really kind of perfect your strategies and skills with them.
Mm-hmm. Shadow's a jerk, though. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Like Shadow. I mean, it's very funny, but like, oh my gosh, like what a big sad tough guy crybaby. And I think the fact that Shadow like reduced me to shouting at the screen reactions was a good thing. I can't believe that guy. Mm-hmm. What a jerk.
Yeah.
Just get over yourself, my dude.
Yeah.
Obviously, Locke is great. Little adorable thief boy. I equipped him with a ribbon because that's his deal. And Terra is wonderful. What a wonderful character. I wish they hadn't done that thing that they tend to do in these games where they're like, the thing that's going to save the lady is a bunch of babies. That kills me. It's like when I spent so many quarters beating Darkstalkers in the arcade, and my reward was seeing Felicia turn into a nun. And sing Happy, Happy, Joy, Joy with children. And I'm like, what is this? This is the death of a character. This is a sacrifice of self. I don't understand. It's not like Darkstalkers has any story in it, but that's another story for another time. Regardless, Terra's conflict between like being enslaved by the Empire and not knowing what the deal was with her powers, transforming into that fascinating all-white visage, all that stuff, so cool. They kind of do her dirty in the third act, and it's not saying that like her like finding like the love of kids is like a bad thing. That's good. That's a good thing. It's just kind of like, I've seen this before. I know what you're doing. Stop it. Women are more than that. Like, she's like, I just want to understand. I just want to understand love. And I'm like, you could understand love in a bunch more compelling ways than whatever the heck that was.
Yeah, I mean, she's such a great character. She's somebody who is clearly different, has been removed from her parents.
I love that you get to
orphan,
play her backstory.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a lot about Tara that is relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, that can be pretty much anyone who is different and finds themselves like not fitting into society and sort of like wondering how to make that work.
Or being used by society.
Right. Yeah. She's absolutely great. I have made 2 pearlers, really 3 pearlers from Final Fantasy VI, and the 3 characters that I've made are Tara in Esper form, and Celeste.
Celeste is awesome.
Because Tara and Celeste are my favorite characters from this game. They are both just so wonderfully complex, have such great characterization, and have really satisfying arcs across the entire story.
Yeah, Celeste is a character that didn't really compromise herself at any point. Like, that's just she's got a very solid arc. It doesn't get too complicated. Like, they kind of give Celeste her big moments early on, and then she's just Celeste for the rest of the game after the world changes. But she's great, and a steady character who was always in my crew when I had the option for that.
Yeah, because she's awesome. That runic power is amazing.
Yeah, Edgar's a great womanizer archetype. I love that he's got this invention thing going on. I didn't get 2 of his weapons. I love how kind of like it's just part of the mystery of this game is, where does this stuff come from? Where could it be? Go to that Coliseum and like gamble random items and like see if you get something better. Like, I didn't even get a chance to really sink my teeth into that, though I did score a couple cool things from it. But like, there's so much going on in this game. It's so cool. In the future, all the things that I'm kind of like griping about low key here, maybe high key, I don't know. They dealt with them well in future games. They've figured out how to pace the game to give people more time to do the things. And I'm just like, okay, cool. Now do it with this. Oh, hey, fun fact about Tara. Did you know Tara's not her name?
Yeah, I know they changed it for they changed it for the Western localization.
Yeah, her name's Tina.
Yeah, Tina.
Apparently, that name was almost universally reviled by American playtesters. They're like, I can't deal with this girl named Tina. My sister's named Tina. Like, I don't know what their deal was, but I guess it was too normal for them. I think Tara is a beautiful name. I mean, it means earth.
Very poignant.
It feels like that's one of those moments where there's a lot of rocky translation stuff because we played the Final Fantasy III edition of this game, to be clear. There's a lot of rocky stuff in that edition, but that change was actually brilliant and improved the game. I feel strongly about that.
Totally.
Does it imply a lot that's maybe not there? Yeah, probably, but I love it, so shut up.
Yeah. There are like a lot of characters that I feel like didn't get to be realized quite as well as they should have, though. Like Umaro.
I mean, I love having a big auto-fighting Yeti in my party. I think that's really cool. But yeah, I would love to do more with that guy.
Yeah, I guess specifically the characters that you pick up in the world of Ruin, they just didn't have time to really do a whole lot of characterization with them. But even Mog that you encounter in the first world, you really don't get to do a whole lot with him either.
No, you don't. And I mean, they put Mog front and center on that box art. I want it, like, he's cool. He's a slam dancing Moogle. Love this. So good. Just anyway, he's delightful. Their very 90s characterization of him in the translation was super fun. There just wasn't enough of him. Like, you see him so early on in the game and then don't get to touch him until the third act. And I was like, when am I gonna get him? I think I probably wandered around Narsh far more than I needed to, or Narshi, however. Anyway, because I thought, well, surely I can pick up Mog. Surely.
Right.
I mean, that's not the game's fault. That's the packaging's fault.
Yeah.
But
any notable enemies that you would like to bring up?
I mean, that's an overwhelming question. We've named some already. Who is my most smashable enemy in Final Fantasy VI? I know who I want to punch in the face the most, and the one that I want to punch in the face the most is that guy who possesses your characters in like he's like a ghost, and he like will like randomly dip into one of your characters, and you have to like kill your character to get him to come out. I hate that guy, but that was a very clever mechanic.
Yes. I think my most smashable enemy of Final Fantasy VI is Ultros. Because
I mean he's smashable by nature.
Love to hate that guy.
Yeah, I mean that's a guy made to be smashed. He's got a face you can punch, you know.
Yeah, well, mission accomplished.
And it's so beautiful when you finally see like what happens to him, and he just ends up in like indentured servitude, working the desk at the Coliseum. I'm like, this is perfect, and I love that he never really came up again.
Yeah,
like
when he told you that was gonna be the last time you were gonna fight him, that was true.
And Ultros is an icon. Truly, Ultros is an icon, not just because of like, later representations, like continued sort of appearance in Final Fantasy stuff, but here as this kind of like joke nemesis, it is something that almost immediately was aped by other games. BioZilla recently played a game called God, or GOD. I forget what it actually translates to. And there is, if you haven't seen it yet, on the Omniverse Discord, in the video games channel, there is a thread that I think has been pinned that is his like screen-capped blow-by-blow playthrough of this entire game.
Extremely comprehensive.
It is the most like Ancient Aliens, paranormal, like apocalyptic JRPG. It is the most killing god of all games.
Oh yeah,
is this game called God that was never released in the United States. And there's a character called Batty who is a blatant Ultros ripoff to a degree that is absurd. I mean, this whole game rips off other games inside of it. It has to be seen to be believed. But yeah, Ultros is an icon. Ultros is perhaps like one of the most like top 3 iconic things about Final Fantasy VI, I dare say.
And I know that is probably a bit of a cop-out answer, but it's the one I'm going with.
Well, I mean, good for you, Ultros. You made it, buddy. You finally made something of yourself.
I want to make one comment too, just about the number of items in this game. And by items, I mean equipment.
Yes.
I think that this may be the only JRPG in history to have more equipment items in chests than like items like potions and elixirs.
Well, you can't even buy ethers.
Yeah.
You just can get tinctures the whole time.
At least nowhere that we found. I'm not 100% sure about that, but
the equipment was nutso. And when I get a new piece of equipment, I was praying for a better menu system. So the menu system, it's a little rough. I know it could be 1,000 times worse. Don't get me wrong. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, they could like completely arbitrarily limit the number of items that you carry and have your equipped items be in your inventory even though you have them equipped. I mean,
but the order of sorting was bad. The fact that it was all in one menu was bad. When I have characters who can use items like Shadow's throw ability, and I have to scroll through literally all of my equipment, which I can't necessarily sell because someone may need it at some point in time, to get to the shuriken so I can throw the shuriken, that's bad user design.
It is.
That's a bad user experience. And I had to hold on to all of the relics and a lot of the equipment because you have to outfit like potentially 12 characters at once with equipment. You can't not have all that stuff.
It was just such a delight playing that game when you're in a dungeon. Almost every chest that you open has some new piece of gear for your party.
And it's exciting to figure that out.
Yeah. There are times going through these dungeons where it's like, please give us a Phoenix down or an X potion or something because we need it. But no, here, have some more Gaia gloves.
Well, but that's the thing. I mean, that you might get more Gaia gloves, but also it's more likely to be something weird and unique.
Right.
Like something that changes fight to jump or augments jump so that it's not just like a weird thing you can do and turns into the best attack that Mog can do.
Right. That's just another way that this game has more flexibility and more options when it comes to outfitting your party than any other RPG I've ever seen.
Yeah, you get used to all how the characters work and stuff, but then when you put on like the Genji glove so that Sabin can have 2 like clawed martial arts hand weapons on each of his hands, so he's attacking twice. But then you can put on another relic that like doubles his attacks, and all of a sudden he is just slashing people. It's such a cool
like
thing.
Wolverine just in there.
He just berserker barrages through the third act of that game, and it's awesome.
I love to, even though I think it's a bit broken, that by equipping Magicite to any character, you can teach any spell in the game to any character.
Yeah, which ensures that no one is useless. If you're like, I like this ability, but I can't use it all the time, then okay, give that character with that ability that you like but you won't use all the time some Magicite so you can train them to like be the healer and then also do that ability when you need it or something like that. It really, I don't like tactical games, but it invited my brain to enjoy a lot of tactical decision making.
The only downside to that is that when you do eventually get like the most powerful spells in the game, like Ultima, and you teach that to everybody in your party, the battles basically turn into just casting Ultima over and over and over and over and over again.
Sometimes twice per character.
Right. But that happens at the very end of the game, and by then you're kind of like, I'm just ready to steamroll these fools.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, but yeah, that is what happened. Once I got access to Ultima, that was the move.
You know, it's funny that you can choose to have Ragnarok turned into a Magicite or into a sword. I was curious what you were going to do. I didn't give you any input at all. I just let you make the choice on your own. I don't think I have ever had him turn Ragnarok into a sword before. I have always gone with the Magicite.
I mean, at this point, I'm really curious what it would do. It can't possibly be better than Ultima, right?
And yet, from what I was reading online, there was a lot of people that were saying that for this specific version of the game, for Final Fantasy III version, that the sword is better.
How is that possible?
Because you can go embed it in the arena, and you can get the most powerful sword in the game. And again, I don't know exactly what that does or what makes it better because I've never done that before. But from what I understand, there are a lot of people that say that that is actually the superior path.
Wow.
Now I'm really curious.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Huh. But I mean, and that's this game for you. There is a lot to it. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I still want to go back and fight the dragons. I don't know if I'm actually going to end up doing that, but I don't even know what happens if I do.
We should go do it.
Well, then we have to get our save file out of Kefka's tower, and that seems like a bit of a chore.
Well, you can see why I've played this game many times.
Yeah, it invites a person to. It really does. Like, I can see that, like, having a game that's this big and also has a wealth of replayability is really unique and fun. It's super good. I'm just, you know, what's interesting about it that I think is, I don't think I've heard anybody say about it to me over the years, is part of what makes it good is not just the good characters and story. And that's the thing that, like, that's obvious. It has those things, and people get attached to those characters, obviously. But it is mechanically so diverse and weird and interesting to a degree that is very Final Fantasy of it, but is perhaps even still of all the Final Fantasies I've played, the most Final Fantasy.
I agree.
Does that statement make sense?
I think so. I think there is something to be said about that delineation between Final Fantasy VI and then Final Fantasy VII and beyond. But I think that at least if you're looking at the first 6 games, I do think that you're right, that this Final Fantasy VI is the most Final Fantasy game of them all.
It's a weird statement to make. But yeah, it is just so consistently mechanically surprising and interesting, and it feels like it's adapting and changing all the time. And could it be like smoother? Sure, it could be smoother. Like, in order to make a sane comparison, I would need to play at least Final Fantasy 4 and 5 to really understand what's going on here. But it is very surprising, all the things that they did and accomplished in this game.
And I will just call out the score by Nobuo Uematsu is
it's so legendary.
Incredible. It's fantastic. But I mean, everything that dude does is at that same level. So, you know, it's hard to like call this one out specifically. But I mean, yeah, the score of this game is a masterpiece among a bunch of masterpieces that he has done.
While I did not play this game, I did own Kefka's Domain, the American released CD set of all the music in this game, because I knew that was good. Found it at a thrift store, which was fortunate because shortly after this, Square of America produced their own in-house game, Secret of Evermore, which I really, really like, but it bankrupted them. So all the weird stuff that they did, like releasing the score to Final Fantasy 6/3 in the States, well, all that cool merch went up in smoke. But do you remember how in one issue of GamePro, there was like a catalog of Square merch of like Final Fantasy 3 the t-shirt and Final Fantasy 3 the hat and Final Fantasy 3 the soundtrack and all the Secret of Evermore poster and the soundtrack and the t-shirt.
That.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really cool. I held on to it for years. Like, I don't know where it is now, but it was like this last gasp of like Square of America was like, RPGs are the future, and then they went bankrupt.
See, I was never really into merch very much. I mean, I was just in it for the games. So
well, yeah, but like this was the first time that I saw like, oh, role playing can be a lifestyle. Interesting. And all this stuff is, I don't know. It's either in a landfill, languishing in a warehouse somewhere, or it's somehow gone. I don't know. It's all very, very weird, eclectic, Square stuff.
Well, any other final thoughts on Final Fantasy VI before we sign off here?
I loved it very much. I think it's very good. I'm probably gonna go search for some fanfic about it to like spend more time with the characters.
Yeah.
Find some well-reviewed fanfic. I have a friend, shout out to Lauren the Flute, who is like big on like Locke, kind of like embodies Locke. I believe cosplays as Locke. And performs some really wonderful live instrument renditions of pieces of the score from this game as a part of her band, The Returners. You know, it means a lot to a lot of people who I care about, and I'm really glad that I can finally participate in this discussion. And I am very attached to the characters, and I would like to see more with them. So we'll see what I do
for sure
with that.
Well, thank you for playing my favorite game of all time, and now we're gonna get back to EarthBound.
Yep, time to finish EarthBound Beginnings and then figure out how to deal with what comes next.
Thanks for listening. Until then, I'm Jess.
I'm Cat.
And that's all she wrote. I feel like there's something better we can do with that.
Stay tuned for our upcoming podcast, Returners to Sender. That's not a real thing. We can't possibly make that a real thing. We still have 2.5 more EarthBound games to do.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Mother She Wrote is made possible thanks to the generous support of our Patreon producers, Amber Devereaux, Austin Brown, Becky Scott Fairley, Bob Hogan, Joe Tank Ricciardelli, Josh King, Mjolnir MK86, Patrick Webster, Sean T. Red, Shumai Sunbun, and our super deluxe executive Patreon producers, Big Bad Shadow Man, Marcus Larson, and Jamieson Lalone.
You can join the team on Patreon or supporting cast. Just head to mothershewrote.earth/support. And if you think Mother She Wrote is simply smashing, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And be sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast player.
This series is recorded and produced in Orlando, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, on lands stolen from their indigenous people, the Timucua and Seminole, and Shawnee, Cherokee, Osage, Seneca Iroquois, Miami, Hopewell, and Adena.
Acknowledgement of the first peoples of these lands and the lasting repercussions of colonization is just the beginning of the restorative work that is necessary. Through awareness, we can prompt allyship, action, and ultimately decolonization.
For links to aid Indigenous efforts and to learn more about the First Nations of the land where you live, visit omniverse.media/landback.
Mother She Wrote is written, produced, and performed by me, Jessica Mudd.
And me, Kat Blackard. Our original score is composed and performed by Jessica Mudd.
Mother She Wrote is not affiliated with Nintendo, Shigesato Itoi, or any rights holders of the Mother and EarthBound intellectual properties. Please play the game's official Nintendo releases.